Okay, well, welcome everyone. Welcome to the first day of the EWB conference for 2009. I hope you're all excited as I am. Welcome to, first I'll introduce Danny Almagor, CEO, as you know, of Engineers Without Borders, and from the start, myself, I'm Matt Walsh. I was also one of the early members from the start and helped shape this little fledgling organisation into, at least in the early days, into what it is today. And I don't think proud is the word to describe, ecstatic, exuberant, and just seeing what this has become is just incredible. I'll just start by, it is a brief history of EWB, and I'll just quickly read what was written in 2006 about the history of EWB, so 3 years ago, when we were only roughly about 3 years old. And I'll just start by reading. At the end of 2002, a small group of young engineers came together with the idea of starting Engineers Without Borders in Australia. The idea had begun over 20 years ago in France, without much international exposure. In 2000, a group of Canadians began Engineers Without Borders Canada and have since grown into a very strong and successful national organisation. The Canadian model spread throughout North America and then to Europe. By 2002, EWB has established a presence in over 6 countries, including Australia. Although a formal international organisation does not yet exist, there are strong ties between the various EWBs around the world. On April 14, 2003, EWB in Australia was registered as a company, limited by guarantee. By June that year, EWB President and Founder Daniel Almagor participated in an EWB USA program in Thailand, installing a water filter system and a sewage treatment system for a village in northern Thailand. In July that same year, a team of 4 EWB founding members travelled across Australia to survey a potential project in outback Aboriginal community of Yalata. In September, the EWB president travelled overseas on a Churchill Fellowship to attend a number of EWB conferences in North America and Europe, meeting up face-to-face with many of our EWB colleagues around the world. By the end of 2003, EWB has managed to gain widespread support from the community, including Engineers Australia and a number of other not-for-profit and corporate organisations. It was in November 2003 that EWB formally opened its doors to members and officially began operations. In May 2004, EWB sent its first volunteer, Matt Walsh, on a project in Nepal working on a wind turbine blade with the University of Kathmandu. By the end of 2004, EWB had over 1,000 members, 8 chapters, and had sent another 5 people overseas on projects. Growth in 2005 saw more than 10 people overseas, 2,000 members, 19 chapters, and 2 full-time staff members at the national office. In December 2005, EWB had an incredibly successful national conference, bringing nearly 200 EWB members from around the country to hear about development from a lineup of speakers that included many of Australia's prominent names in international development. Wow, that's a start. And what we're going to present to you today is sort of like, okay, let's go back to the beginnings again. It's sort of, there's a lot of new faces here, and not everyone knows where we've come from. This kind of gives a bit of a snapshot of where we've been, but also the humbler beginnings as well. I'll hand over to Danny, who's going to start us on this journey.
I have to apologise to Matt because I saw this and it was written, history of EWB written in 2006. I printed it out and said, why don't we read this and then see how our stories compare? But that's the boring part. Let's get on to the stories because that's much more fun. What we'll do, we're just going to handball back and forth and basically tell our stories of the things that happened in the beginning. And by all means, let's have a conversation. So if you want to stop us and ask questions or tell us where we're wrong, because you know, well, we were there, but you know, our memories aren't as good as they should be. So you can insert your own stories. Some of you have been around for a very long time with EWB. Here's like really quickly a history of our logos. It was, I don't know how we came up with that. Easy to read, but we ended up in a nice green. That was when we tried it, when we got a little bit of help, when we employed a graphic designer.
The logo itself was actually on the back of an envelope, literally on the back of an envelope, and it was just sketched out by hand. And if you note, there's some obvious exclusions of Tasmania are not there, and New Zealand, so they're not too happy about that.
So lots of yeah. Right. So, I'll begin with really, really briefly the story about the idea. There's a whole lot more, and Matt and I were talking about what stories to tell you, and you know, like we started laughing a lot about thinking about all the stories. I'll go through a few little bits and pieces. This one is when we first came together as a group. So Matt and I studied together along with a number of other engineers. We did aerospace engineering, so Engineers Aboard has started in the lecture theatres in aerospace engineering. Shane Korosek, Andrew Sedaris, Sam Redmond as well from our course, and then a couple of others that we brought in from Monash and RMIT in Melbourne. So what we did basically, very early days, at the end of 2002, there was an inspiration. We all decided to get together and have a chat. I met with Sam, I remember, at this chicken shop that was the office, the very first office, and spoke about the idea. And basically I went through to each one of the guys who were eventually the founders of EWB and said, you know, here's this great idea. We've always spoken about making a difference and using our engineering to change the world, etc. The doctors did it. They won a Nobel Prize. Like, you know, it's a good idea. Why don't we just start with Engineers Without Borders? So, so the coffee shop, and then we organised a meeting at my parents' place. That's really much what we did at the meetings. Just hung out. I don't know how someone convinced me to put yellow blonde tips in my hair, but it happened once. Not again. And basically that was the beginning. We all came together and we sat around and we started trying to work out what is this organisation. When we first came together, we didn't realise there were other Engineers Without Borders around the world. So I remember really early on, what I did, I got onto the phone, first on the internet, Alta Vista or whatever it was before Google became Google, and Googled, not on Google, for Engineers Without Borders. What's the word now for Googling? Pre-Google. So anyway, I looked out for Engineers Without Borders, and what came up was actually Engineers Without Borders in Canada. So I thought, that's amazing, you know, somebody started this before us, and I read a little bit about them. They were pretty early on. It started in 2000, so 2 years old. Read about them, it sounded wonderful. It was started by these two young guys. So I picked up the phone and I called up Parker Mitchell. Parker Mitchell was one of the co-founders of Engineers Without Borders in Canada. And I remember having this phone conversation. You know, we'd just gotten together and decided we're going to do this thing. And I called up Parker and I said, all right, you know, hi, my name's Danny, I'm from Australia, blah, blah, blah. This is, you know, what I've done and who I am. I don't know really anything. I'd just graduated a year and a half, or close to 2 years before from my degree. Never even worked in engineering. After graduating, I went and lived in Eildon and worked in the outdoors and, you know, did rock climbing and stuff. Like, I still haven't worked a day in engineering yet. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But anyway, so I called up Parker and I said to him, you know, we want to start this thing in Australia. We've got a group of passionate people. We reckon the idea is brilliant. We reckon there's a lot of support here. How do I do it? And on the other side of the phone, I just basically, not dissimilar to Eric, your presentation, right? Basically dashing all hopes of Engineers Without Borders ever being able to make a difference in the world or do anything at all, right? You call up, you know, Parker, you know, how did you do it? How did you set it up? Well, Danny, I don't know who you are. I don't know if you've ever met, but you probably won't be able to do it. It's really hard. You have to give up your life. Development is not what you think it is. It's, you know, what have you studied? What have you learned? What have you read? Like, I haven't read anything. I'm calling you. That's, you know, this is my first research. And you know, at the end of the conversation, really, it was sort of like, okay, let's just agree not to call the Canadians again for a while. So then I looked at the second link, which was EWB USA. So I clicked on that, and then there was a name, Bernard Amadei. So I called them up, and I was really nervous because I thought, you know, if I get it again, we're closing the shop here. And EWB USA was amazing, and the guy on the other side of the phone was a professor of engineering, and he was the exact opposite of Parker. And he said, wow, it's amazing, Australia. I've never been to Australia. It's so exciting. How can I, you know, this is cool. And if you start, then we can meet and we can hang out. And he basically was all supportive and stuff. So we got one of each. We decided we'll go for it. Funnily enough, we ended up developing very close relationships with both the Canadians and the US. But the Canadians took a lot longer to try and convince. And that was our foray into writing a mission statement.
That's right. The notable exception in this photo is Danny's mother. she was pretty much our caterer, secretary. You know, she put us up in these first things. We spent many weeks in February, like in the early part of 2003, meeting together, just thrashing out what we want, who we want to be. We didn't have much of an idea of development, so we educated ourselves. We took Parker's advice. We read lots of books. We tried to really understand what it is we wanted to be, and it took us a really long time to come up with the like a mission statement or a vision statement, a set of values. And I was going through some stuff and I found the first minutes of the meeting of Engineers Without Borders Australia. And it's quite long, but I don't expect you all to read it, but really there was item 1, concept brainstorm, and that was the only item on the thing. So that's all we did the first couple of meetings was just go through what we wanted to be. The interesting one I thought was the philosophy that came out of that. And we're really trying to come up with, okay, what does this mean? And bearing in mind we're a bunch of, you know, engineers, aeronautical engineers who don't have any idea of development or development speak for that matter, we went through and we came up with this philosophy, which is volunteer training program with the objective to instill an ethos of minimal impact socially, psychologically, and environmentally. I don't know where psychologically came from, but we didn't want to impact people psychologically. Also working in symbionts with the environment, local cultures and values. Symbionts doesn't come up much in development spec, I wish it really would. Well-defined assignments, I think we're still in our university mode, well-defined assignments, including a project closure section which highlights lessons learned and project feedback. So it was kind of these things that we knew we needed to happen. And largely we were reading a lot about this sort of stuff anyway, so it sort of came out in that context. From there, we
just go back one step because
yeah. Oh yeah, sorry.
Like we didn't have we had very modest ambitions. I'll just say, because the potential for increasing the organisation's scope led to a world without borders, where we'd include all professions, so journalists without borders and we wanted to basically take over. And thought, how easy would that be? You wouldn't need a passport if you wanted to travel anywhere.
I think from this, I think we realised early that we weren't the experts, and we were going to have to collaborate with people. So those ideas of collaboration came from that very first meeting, that we weren't going to, we don't know the answers, and we're going to have to ask for help.
I have a question, if I might.
Yeah, go.
Could you just sort of describe, in your own words, obviously, why you left out points 3, 5, 7 and 8 off
the what were the other yeah, you don't want to know. It was what we ended up coming up with was the in those early days was the mission statement, and it pretty much hasn't changed. Danny, has it changed much since?
I think we've got sustainable development in there now.
We've got sustainable engineering projects, but you know, as a first crack at it, I think we had a pretty good first shot. I think we plagiarized a lot of it from. We're engineers, so we're plagiarists. So I think we took a lot of it from the Canadians and the US as well. And also, we went through a process of defining what our values are, and it really did come from a feeling that we wanted to have action. We didn't know much, and we weren't going to find out things by just reading books. We were going to have to actually do some stuff, and which led us to experimenting with projects. And I'll talk a little bit more about Nepal later. But that really was, we had to get out in the field and do something. We couldn't just keep talking about it. And whether that was right or wrong, and in a lot of cases it was wrong, but the idea was we learnt so much from being practical and having action. The other things that we came up with were environmental sustainability, partnering with host communities, real need to educate not only with communities but also ourselves, and also a holistic approach to development. So these things were really embedded in us from day one. And I think that's what led us to meeting with so many partners, is that when we talked to partners, we weren't just saying, we want to help, but we wanted partners who actually shared our values as well. So it was an important exercise to go through, and a lot of people kind of poo-poo that approach, but it really aligned us and really cemented our thinking. And when we approached other people, they understood where we were coming from too. It's
exciting to see what comes up next. There you go. that was a big moment. In April 2003, registered the company. That actually took us a while. We had to find a pro bono lawyer to look after us and help us, because I don't know if anyone's ever registered a company before. I thought it'd be easy, right? But then there's a company limited by guarantee, or a PTY Ltd, or company limited by shares, and then how does a non-profit set up? So what does a constitution look like? I had no idea. So really early on, it was about trying to engage people and getting their support and input in. So we did manage to find pro bono lawyers, which is Minter Ellison, which is still looking after us today. I went on a trip. Matt mentioned in the boring history that we need to rewrite, I think, that we won the Churchill Fellowship, and I managed to go on a trip to visit some of the other engineers at Borders. So I've been speaking to Parker and Bernard on the phone, and increasingly to others. There was another group in the US called Engineers Without Frontiers, which was a real challenge for two organisations to have such similar names. But I managed to get in touch with them as well, and started exploring that. Part of my Churchill trip was actually to go and visit them, right? So I went over to each of the different engineers at Borders, and basically went over there, spent a week. I joined their conferences for those that were having conferences, and basically learnt all about how they ran their projects. Just having a look here, the Churchill Fellowship itself required, there was more. There it is. The Churchill Fellowship required me to write a report at the end. It's very clever, actually. What they do is they give you a sum of money, so it's around about $20,000. You should apply to the Churchill Fellowship if you haven't. It's great. And but they withhold 10% until you hand in your assignment at the end, which I thought was very clever. So, of course, that was probably the only assignment I'd ever handed in on time. Which is good, because now it's a historical document that I can look back at and find out what I was thinking back then. But it was really interesting. Through the Churchill Fellowship, visiting all those countries, as well as I went to the US and visited Engineers Without Borders there, met with the Engineers Without Borders in Canada, went over to Europe, met with Engineers Without Borders in the UK, and met with the Italian Engineers Without Borders, and then went on to a weird stopover in Tunisia. Beautiful place to visit. But no, there was a World Engineering Congress conference that I went to there, and then to Nepal in India and had a look at some actual projects. But I took away some lessons to learn. I'll read you them really quickly. Be prepared. I think one of the things that I saw around the place was haphazard aid. And we were probably, as Matt said in the very beginning, we weren't prepared. We didn't know what we were doing. Very quickly we learnt that lesson, be prepared. And you'll notice that from the day we got together and then registered the company, we still hadn't opened up membership. And that was a lesson that we took on very seriously. It took us a year from when we first sat down together and made a decision to start this organisation to actually announce it to the world, to actually say, okay, we're ready to do this. And in that year, it was all about the learning, the education, speaking to development experts, going into Monash Uni, to Melbourne, to RMIT, and trying to get in touch with as many of the development lecturers that we could, bringing them on board as advisors, speaking to people at Engineers Australia, and indeed development practitioners as well. EWB as a brand was another thing that we learned. We started, that's where we moved from the first iteration of that logo. Don't reinvent the wheel, and take care of your members. And early on we decided that this was going to be a membership organisation. Indeed it still is, with 5,000 members around the country. It was very much a part of the ethos of EWB. It wasn't another development organisation or another sending organisation. It was what I said in that opening before. It was about bringing people together, a community. And we noticed that there was another thing that was told to me, that when you start this thing, you're going to get a lot of people excited by it. It wasn't something that we invented. It wasn't something that I think we came up with that no one had ever thought of before. There were a lot of people already doing this stuff. And all we did, I think, was just hold up a flag, you know, when you're doing a tour of the museum and the leader just holds up that coloured flag so everyone knows which direction to go. You know, we're going to see the next piece of artwork. And I think for us, Engineers Without Borders was just about holding up a flag, saying, for all those who are doing this, who are interested in this, who are already at this museum looking at the art, you know, this is a group. We can go through this together, and as a group it might be a bit more fun and we might be able to affect a bit more change. So looking after members was very much a part of it in the beginning. I'll just read you the conclusion, because I thought this is pretty pretty nice. And very much my touchy feeling. I did the Myers-Briggs when I was doing engineering, and I was a very thinking person while I was doing engineering. I don't know if people know thinking, feeling in Myers-Briggs. You know, I think, and it's all about the logic. Clearly when I started Engineers Without Borders, I'd changed in some way. I'll read you this. It's difficult, this is a conclusion to that report as we start in the organisation. It's difficult to define the path of a new organisation. I believe that its success cannot be measured by the number of members, projects, events, fundraisers, or exposure it receives. Each of these things help the organisation achieve its goals, but they're all means to an end. The end is a concept which is spiritual and intuitive. It's pretty cool for an engineer. Do people feel fulfilled working with Engineers Without Borders? Are people's paradigms shifting because of Engineers Without Borders work and goals? Is the quality of people's lives being changed and touched by the work of Engineers Without Borders? If we can answer yes to these questions, I will consider EWB a success. So from the very outset, we're always looking at the effect on people rather than the numbers that we can achieve.
What were the ones you didn't put in?
Which ones?
What were the points that you took away from the trip? We rehearsed this last night.
Think of me as a goldfish. What were the points I took away from the trip, Matt?
Anyway, moving on. The unofficial report. Well, I'll bring us to the first project. And I was saying, yeah, it wasn't the prettiest of projects. And if we try to put this one up again, it certainly wouldn't get through the program team. That's for sure, because at the time it was very much people driven and not process driven. I think that's been a big shift in the organisation from when it started. It was largely about passion and enthusiasm in people, and now it's moved into passion, enthusiasm and processes. And that's really a big change, and it's really important to have that, especially when we're talking about quality. And everything about quality is what this project wasn't. So as you can see on the top left there, we have what we wanted, and then bottom right is what we ended up with. So, and there was some really interesting lessons out of that, and largely it was we pushed the project. It wasn't pulled from the partner organisation. The partner organisation was a university whose, not only were we on Nepali time, but we're on university Nepali time, which is, oh my God. The context of we try to basically come up with a turbine blade design in 6 weeks. We checked the materials. I actually have I used to do another presentation called not Engineers Without Borders, but Engineers Without Bunnings. Because you really don't know what you're walking into until you go into these environments. And to lob someone over there like myself, for not even 6 weeks to try and get from, we spent first 4 weeks trying to find materials that would actually work. Interestingly though, this man Ranjan, who went on to do a Masters of Wind Turbine Engineering in Denmark, and he became got top of his class in Denmark. He was the one I was communicating with when we were back in Australia, and I'd always ask him questions like, can you get this material, can you get that, can you get this? And he'd always just, yes, we can. And what I found out when I got there was no, they couldn't. And he was actually being in a very Nepali way. He just didn't want to hurt my feelings by saying no. So this is not the ideal thing. However, had we been there, had we spent some time there scoping projects and actually finding out what the objective was, we would have gone. What we did end up with though was we ended up sending lots of engineers on the project over time, and I think that's kind of the philosophy that we have now. We find a partner and then we keep at it. We keep at the partner. We met some really great people out of this. Alexander, who a lot of people have heard present. Peter Freer, also a lot of people have heard him present. But Alex is, he was working in Nepal for 15 years, and one of the things that first really got me when we started all this was, I don't know if I can commit 15 years to living in in the top of the Himalayas and doing this sort of stuff. And Alex was very religious, and his religion was really driving him. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I've got that same commitment. So it really was, okay, well, how can we make an organisation that lasts 15 years? And that's where you move into those processes versus people. And you can achieve those 15-year lifespans of projects when you've got the processes in place. What a good news story out of this project actually now is that the Ranjan, I think, is still in Denmark working for a wind turbine company, which is a great outcome because engineers in Nepal just don't get jobs in country. They pretty much have to go overseas, and for him to be working for a world-class company is just fantastic. Pramod here on the right, he's set up a wind turbine company in Nepal, so a little consultancy that's actually doing these projects. So there's some really great outcomes there. But that was really all we had for slides. As you can see, we're engineers.
This is pretty. We're just also trying to show you how organised we were when we started the organisation. You know, having be prepared. Remember. I guess the only last story I'll tell you is just about hiring our first staff, and then I just want to throw it out to questions and we can have more of a chat. But so at the end of 2002 we get together, we have a chat about starting this organisation. At the end of 2003, a year later, I get back from the Churchill trip. Shane, who is amazing and still working with us on the website, one of the other founders of the organisation. And the new website, by the way, went up yesterday. So go to EWB.org today. It's amazing. We're expecting to win awards. But Shane had set up the website. So by the end of 2003, we'd opened up membership. It took us another year or so of just sort of exploring, that idea, send Matt overseas, building up membership. I remember one guy, Tanner Tan, from New South Wales, heard about this. I don't know how people hear about stuff, but they do. And he heard about Engineers Without Borders, and he rang me up and he said, "This is amazing, how do I get involved? How do I start something in New South Wales?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, why don't we sit down for a coffee and we can have a chat about it?" And so he goes, "Okay." And no kidding, got in his car that weekend, drove down to Melbourne and said, "Here I am for the coffee, let's chat." And that was amazing. That was the passion of some of the people very early on. He fully came down to Melbourne that weekend, and we chatted, and then went back to Sydney and started a chapter there. Excuse me. So we started a few chapters around the place. Membership started to build. We saw. Actually, I went to the doctor a couple of days ago, as I got this terrible cough, and the doctor said to me, this is on Tuesday morning, she basically said, "Go home, watch Oprah, chill out for the next week, just take it easy." And I said, "Sure." So do you have any other alternatives? So she gave me like these really big antibiotics. I don't know if that means they're strong, but they're big. So anyway, so we grew from that first year of raising about $40,000. That was seed funding. A big portion of it was left over from the Churchill Fellowship, because I give you 20,000, but most of the people that go are older, they stay in nice hotels. I didn't, so I came back with about 10 grand left over, which was great for EWB. And the Pratt Foundation, which gave us a grant of $25,000 to start it up. So that was that first year, and about 40 grand all up, because Matt pitched in and all of us pitched in what we could ourselves. The year later, after we opened up that membership, we grew massively to $180,000. So the demand was just there, and with that, we had the opportunity to hire our first staff. And we brought on Tim Prohaski, and then very quickly afterwards, we brought on Stuart Davis. And Stuart was, I'll tell you the story of meeting Stuart because that's kind of funny and cool. Stuart was a guy who's just a cool cat. The guys who at school, they were the popular kids. So Stuart's just that guy, he's just cool. And he was managing a bar, a really awesome bar in Melbourne called the Mink Bar. So I was chatting to a friend of mine I went to school with, and he said, "Listen, I've got this guy that you got to meet. His name's Stuart Davies. He's really into the stuff you're into." So I said, "All right, I'll meet him." And he goes, "All right, well, come down." He basically runs the Mink Bar. And I just thought to myself, okay, so how is a guy who's running a cool bar in Melbourne, bartender and stuff like that, going to be interested in the type of work of Engineers Without Borders? We turned up, and there was Stuart, who'd done an undergrad in economics and was in the process of finishing a master's in international development, as well as working at Oxfam part-time while he was running this bar. I went in there, told him about Engineers Up Orders, said, I've got no idea about these projects, you know, I don't know how to do them and stuff. Would you be interested in coming in and helping out? You know, it's basically setting up the whole projects team. And he looked at me and said, you know, that sounds good, like that'd be really interesting. I said, well, it's really great, we've fundraised some money. I don't know exactly what he was on, he never told me, but I think it was closer to, I don't know, maybe close to the six-figure number. And I said, well, we've fundraised money, I've got $35,000 to bring you on full-time to come and run this thing, right, to help me out. And a couple of months before that, Tim Brahowski was, also came on for that, and all the staff came on at that level. And he looked at me and he said, I'm kind of earning a little bit more where I'm at, but that sounds like a good challenge. I'll give you 3 years. And he basically left his job and came and worked at Engineers Up Orders for the next 3 years. He left last year and set up the projects team. And that was pretty much the story of staff. All the staff were doing these amazing things. I'm going to embarrass Kim, who's over there, by very quickly just reading an email that I got from Kim when she first heard about Engineers Up Orders. Kim came on after Stuart as our next staff member, and then Lizzie, who you see out there. So a lot of these people are still here. These are very early days. Kim was working at Worley Parsons, a big engineering firm, and to come onto Engineers Up Orders, there was sort of a natural process early on there. With $35,000, you're not attracting people away from their engineering salaries. So it starts with 1 day a week. It's a great way to do it, you know, just a little bit at a time. And then 1 day a week turns into 2 days a week. And then, because we're so much more fun than their engineering work, it turns out into an eventual shift across from, you know, earning a whole lot more and doing these big projects to Engineers Up Orders. Let's bring up Kim's email. Sorry?
Let's do it.
Just making sure there's nothing dangerous in here. Hi, I've just found out about and joined your organisation. It's exactly what I was looking for, and congratulations for filling the void between very expensive non-skilled volunteer placements and senior engineer full-time well-paid job opportunities. I'm very keen to get involved, but I've noticed that most of your operations will take place out of the eastern states. I'm from WA. Are there any chapters here? Unfortunately, I didn't get involved with EWB at uni. EWB didn't exist when you were at uni. But if there are no Perth chapters around, I'd be really interested in starting a non-university one. If I start and become the president, would this disqualify me from participating in any overseas projects myself? Already she was thinking ahead. A couple of other nice things. Thank you for your information. I look forward to hearing from you. That was the kind of thing that started Engineers Up Orders. I wrote back and said, well done, chapter president of WA. That was a tough interview process, and it didn't take much longer before I said, all right, let's open up an office in WA. I actually tried to convince Kim to move to Melbourne, but she always wins when it's Kim or me. And we opened up an office in Perth. And basically that's how it grew as an organisation. Do you have anything to add? I thought we'll throw it out to questions. Yeah. What I wanted to do, Matt and I were sort of talking about this, I wanted to give you the sense that, you know, Engineers Up Orders, and the name might sound like it's this big organisation. It really was just people who were passionate, who were interested, often who knew a lot less than they should, who got involved in this. And I sort of think our challenge early on was to grab that energy and start educating it. And from the very outset, as you saw, what Matt put up there, education was a big part. We held our first conference, all the speakers were from other NGOs, we had the CEO of Oxfam, etc., basically telling us a lot of what you were telling us this morning, which is aid is tough, aid is complex, right? Aid is challenging. You know, we're not going to get it right. We're not going to get it right a lot of the time, right? But it's no reason not to try. And that was the basic idea of Engineers Up Orders. We're still learning, we're still relatively young and trying to work it out, but I guess with your help, we'll keep on getting better. So, anyone want to ask questions?
How do you find the projects and get involved with the partners that
I'll tell you how we used to and then how we do. We used to have this wonderful strategic approach called the shotgun, right? You know, the opportunistic, you know, project finding mechanism, which basically said if anyone's got a project, come and talk to us. Which wasn't so effective. Now we've got, as Matt said, we've moved on to much more process-driven organisation to a more extent. Obviously, people are still at the core of it. We call it sort of that sniper approach. We look and we target areas that we're interested in. An example is we opened up a new we opened up in a new country in Vietnam. We decided to expand, and Kim, who runs all of our Southeast Asia programs, so what didn't disqualify her from actually getting involved and going overseas, but Kim and I went over to Vietnam and did a scoping mission. We met with organisations on the ground. We did a lot of research beforehand. Who's there? What are they doing? We spoke to organisations, the large ones like Oxfam's, CARE. Found out who their partners were, what communities they were working with, and then started engaging with them. And then basically did this scoping mission, like first dating, going and visiting, and building a relationship. So for us, we went there. I think it was a year later, at least, before we actually had our first project and sent the first people there. So now it's relationship building. We do due diligence on the partner. We look at the partner and say, are they the right ones for us? Are we an organisation that can help them? If it's a governance issue, for example, then maybe Engineers Without Borders aren't the best people to go in there in the beginning. So we try and ask the question of where do we fit? Where does the organisation fit with us? Is there a mutual partnership available? And I guess a lot also of intuition. But those are sort of some of the questions that we ask. Once a partnership is built, then we look at a long-term relationship. So like Matt said, we sort of continue to come back and look at other possible projects. So for example, a community that we're working with in Queensland, and you'll hear from Cheryl Buchanan, who'll talk later this afternoon, who's the chairwoman of the Kuma Traditional Owners. With that community, we started a relationship quite a few years ago with a waste management project, and then the relationship has sort of flourished, and now we're doing an energy project with that community. So it's talking about the relationship with the community as opposed to seeing projects as independent. So we don't basically run it on, this project is it, so we'll do it and then we'll leave. This community is a community we want to have a relationship with, so we'll continue to do projects with them. Yeah, you take it.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, is there a desire or any efforts to try to make a more international EWB with more formalised those things?
You could take that
one. EWB, on the international level, EWB has been really interesting. It's grown very quickly. Some of them are very, very established professional organisations. Others are just, very early stages like we were back in 2002, just a group of people who are passionate. Some have been that same group of people who are passionate for 5-6 years and haven't moved on. So at the moment it's kind of difficult to sort of put them all under the same basket and sort of say, not like Doctors Without Borders that have a number of major areas, but they all run with that same international code and the same rough process. For Engineers Without Borders, I don't know why, maybe because it started independently in a number of places. There's no sort of, a common, absolute common ground between them. Some of them are student-based organisations, so only use students. Some only use professionals. We try and engage students and professionals. Some are in developing countries, like EWB Nepal. Then there's EWB Canada, which is a big, strong organisation. One of the ways we work together, we do communicate, but we don't have an overarching organisation. We did send one of our volunteers into Engineers Without Borders Nepal as a capacity building process for them as an organisation. So that was an interesting way to collaborate as two Engineers Without Borders together. But I think it's a process. It's still early days. We're 6-7 years old, so we're just learning how to walk. So I think we'll probably find our feet on an international level sometime over the next probably decade.
There's a question here. Okay.
Whose responsibility, and hopefully someone will step up and do this, is it to educate the general public in terms of good ways to deliver aid? You see disastrous things like with the tsunami, people donating jumpers, and a friend of a friend recently was telling me about how her rich sister got all her rich friends together, and instead of she went to Africa and was inspired to do something and came back and got all her rich friends to donate money, and got sports shops to donate footballs, and really they could have probably gone to the sports shop in the town and said, here's some money, can we buy some of the footballs and send them to the orphanages. So there's lots of bad examples, and Eric touched on this morning as to how we do aid. Can you see anyone stepping up and saying, money's a really good idea for these reasons, this is really a good idea for these reasons. So we have some sort of framework so people don't just default to what feels good or what they think is a good idea, but what actually works. And I know that there might be different answers to different situations as to what works, but some sort of framework.
There's a question.
The question is, whose responsibility? Like, do you,
It's every. Well, I guess it's a, I mean, that's, I mean, have everyone got another couple of hours for that question? We could go around everyone in the room and everyone's going to have a different opinion, but I think it really is everybody, and if we are constituents of a country, we have the power to influence the politicians, we have the power to influence Oz aid policy through getting involved with grassroots organisations like Get Up. At the same time, EWB does take some responsibility to educate where we can. I mean, obviously, everyone's got limited resources, and we try to educate a section of the community that probably 5 years ago really wasn't focused on this. So I would see that, testament to the conference today, that I shouldn't say penetration into companies, but a lot of people are members in organisations now, and there's a lot of corporate partners. So it's also educating the corporate partners as well. So when you say general public, yeah, I think it really is everyone's responsibility.
I think if I can go on that just really briefly, I know we're towards the end of the time. It's funny, I did think about the concept of the general public, and I went to a marketing talk once, and someone said there is no such thing as the general public. You have to have a market. You have to focus on something because it's just too bland. It's like you can't sell anything to the general public. I think for Engineers Without Borders, and I think you're right. I mean, maybe the Australian government has the general public as their audience. For Engineers Without Borders, I think we see ourselves in that technical development sector. So, not just engineers, but engineers, technologists, scientists, construction, anything in that sphere, and then people who are interested in that sphere. So, doctors are often interested because you've got telemedicine, journalists can be interested, etc. So we sort of see that our niche is that technological development, right, or engineering development sector. Within that, I think you're absolutely right. Like, someone needs to be telling people this, and we saw that very much when Engineers Without Borders started. We had two missions. One is work with communities, so get out there and actually do the work, and I've spoken quite a bit about that. The other side was about education, learning and change, we now call it, right? Learning and change, very specifically, learning with an intention for change at the end. There is no slides. I put this up because I thought you guys could see it. There you go. What we found quite early on was people probably, as naive as we were when we started, people who, exactly like your friend or the person you sort of went and saw something and thought, I'll send jumpers. And I had an amazing, one guy, this after the tsunami, 2000, the Boxing Day tsunami, terrible one, that hit. A guy called me up, he was a member of Engineers Without Borders, and this community sort of said, okay, well, how can we get engaged? And he'd organised, free shipment to Sri Lanka, and he'd organised with Bunnings, funnily enough, to donate a certain amount of equipment. He wanted to get it all over there. And for me, it was a big slap in the face. It was quite early on in Engineers Without Borders, but it was a big slap in the face, sort of saying, okay, well, maybe we're going too fast on this. Maybe we need to focus a lot more on that education. And we pulled right back. You'll see that we did try and grow relatively slowly, and the whole time, even today, it's always about holding the reins back. Like the horse wants to run. We thought, what process can we do to try and help people through this journey? So what structure can we use? And we came up with this called the 4 C's to development. And this is the journey. Since, I think this is a circle, so instead of a linear graph, think of it as now a circle, because you go around and continue to go around. It's a feedback loop. Conscious. If you're not conscious, if you don't know that something exists, it doesn't exist. Basic, simple stuff. If you know something exists and don't care, well, it may as well not exist because you're not part of the I want to make a difference club. So from consciousness to concern, people who join Engineers Without Borders, when you go online and you register, you've probably already got the consciousness and concern. Our job, for those who aren't members, is to go out and run events and public awareness within our niche to try and get those people to be conscious and concerned. And that's what's going to grow that impact. Once we've got them, though, we realise that the next step is not to go out in the number 4, which is challenge, and go and do it. But the next step was to comprehend. And the comprehension was all about the education stuff that we did. It was all about running conferences like this. And we found that early on, the engineering profession, particularly, had no concept of that. You know, people, exactly like you were mentioning your friend and that person who rang up, felt like, I've got this need, I've got this urge, I'm really concerned, I can't sleep at night about this issue, I want to go and do stuff. And for about 2 years, we used this as a mechanism, almost as a curriculum, to sort of try and bring people back and say you can't get to step 4 without step 3. You know, we developed a reading list, we developed book clubs, we brought in expert guest lecturers, so we had a lecture series, we ran breakfasts, we ran conferences, we you know, it was quite amazing the amount of effort that we went to try and get that comprehension. And I think that's probably put us in good stead now, that I think a couple of years ago, I remember we were advertising for a position, and I said to one of our superstars, you know, somebody who's been involved with Engineers At Borders for a long time, I said, you know, this is an amazing project, this one's for you. He looked at me and goes, I'm not ready. Right? And I thought, oh, we've gone way too far on this. Like, I thought he was absolutely perfectly ready. But he saw this and he said, no, Danny, I've got more to learn. You know, I'm not ready for this yet. I want to still do some more work here in Australia. I want to go and I want to enrol in the Masters in International Development. So what we started doing is shifting that paradigm. And I think the future for us is to develop or to create a development engineering sector. So like you can do, you know, chemical engineering or civil engineering, you know, the dream for Engineers At Borders is eventually there'll be a development engineering discipline. So you guys, you know, those who are engineers or those who are not engineers who are interested in the field can go and actually learn about this stuff. It's a discipline, it's an area of expertise, and I think that'll make a profound impact on at least part of that general public who we're talking about. Knowing that engineers, there are over 100,000 engineers in Australia, so it's a big chunk of it.
I went for ANU engineering, so we'll see what we can do.
Yeah.
Excellent. We'll wrap up. All right. All right, one more.
I was wondering, how constrained are you by security concerns as to where you can operate and how you assess?
Really simply, we just don't go into dangerous areas. We're long-term sustainable development. If security is a big issue, generally the possibility for long-term sustainable development is not there, or is not there in the same way. I guess also as a young organisation, we saw that risk and just said we want to just you know, not enter into that space. We work with students, we work with young graduates. We also work with senior and retired engineers who might be more comfortable taking risks. But we saw as a whole that community needed to be protected. I don't know, in 10 or 15 years we might, you know, sort of develop better tools to do that. For now, in East Timor, when violence broke out and, you know, the civil conflict was happening, we basically took our volunteers out of East Timor. We were working there before, waited. It was very hard, very sad. We were watching our partners on the ground, you know, getting destroyed, officers getting burned. And only recently did we send someone back into East Timor when we felt that it was safe again. So at the moment, we sort of just stay clear of that.
Yeah, okay, thanks a lot, Danny and Matt. That was really good for myself as well. I've only become involved with Engineers At Borders over the past year, so it's really good to understand the story that's going on before and where we're at now. Can you join me in thanking?